Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we spend so much of our time charting the dizzying speed of modern technology, always focused on what's next.
Always looking ahead, yeah.
But today we're actually hitting the brakes. We're going to pull back to a much more foundational question.
A really fundamental one.
What if true scientific and technical mastery requires a specific established ethical foundation first? What if society's most powerful tools are just inherently dangerous without a pre-calibrated moral compass?
And that is the central, and I'll admit, it's a provocative premise of the research we've been digging into.
It is.
We've been immersed in this fascinating paper from the Human and AI Learning Institute, HALE for short.
Right.
And the title itself is a statement: the need of classical spiritual education as a prerequisite to classical scientific education.
Yeah.
It really challenges the modern hierarchy of learning entirely.
Okay, so let's make sure we and you grasp the scale of this. This HALE study isn't just suggesting that, ethics should run alongside science.
No, not at all. It's much stronger than that.
They're arguing that classical spiritual education isn't optional. It's a necessary foundation, a prerequisite. It has to come first.
Exactly.
Because it provides these three structural supports that science needs: an ethical compass, a framework for meaning, and that communal orientation to guide how knowledge is used.
Precisely. And if you look back through history, education wasn't really seen as one single stream.
Okay.
It was traditionally and very consciously split.
How so?
On one side, you had the cultivation of inner virtues, what the researchers call spiritual education.
Okay.
And on the other, you had the mastery of external skills. Yeah. So scientific, technical, trade education.
And the spiritual part came first.
In the classical model, the cultivation of character, that inner work, was systematically prioritized.
Yeah.
That would be the prerequisite.
That makes a kind of architectural sense, right? You build the foundation before you put up the framework.
Perfect analogy.
So let's define these two domains a bit more clearly. When we talk about the classical goal of scientific education, what the paper calls the tools of society, what are we really talking about?
Well, the scientific goals are very pragmatic. They're outward facing. So we're talking about mastering trades, professions, technical skills.
Well, the how-to.
The how-to, exactly. The aim is to foster innovation, contribute to the economy, and give society experts who can, solve complex problems. It's all about specializing capacity.
But I feel like there's an isolation in that specialization, isn't there? You spend a lifetime mastering one field, and your focus just necessarily narrows.
It has to.
You get amazing at the how to build a bridge, how to write an algorithm, but you might lose sight of the why.
And that's the risk. The why should this be built, or who might this algorithm unintentionally harm?
Right.
And that's exactly where the spiritual domain is meant to step in. If science defines our capacity, spirituality defines our purpose. The paper calls it the compass.
The compass, I like that. So what are the specific targets for this compass?
They're all focused on cultivation. Specifically, cultivating virtues like compassion, humility, and justice.
The big ones.
The big ones. And also establishing a sense of awe, a relationship with the transcendent, it's critical. It forces you to look beyond your own self-interest. And then the goal is always community-oriented, building unity, fostering resilience, providing a stable, shared framework for meaning in life. So science is what society does. Spirituality is who society is.
So it's establishing the being before perfecting the doing.
You've got it.
But achieving that deep ethical being is not easy. So that takes us to the next part of the study. How do they actually do it? What were the historical methods for instilling these virtues?
Right, because they clearly understood that just, lecturing about ethics doesn't work.
Yeah.
The traditional methods of spiritual education they were comprehensive, highly varied, designed to weave virtue into the fabric of life itself.
So give us some examples of these practical tools.
Okay, so for communal cohesion, you had rituals and ceremonies. These aren't just empty forms, they're mechanisms for creating a shared identity, a collective reverence.
That sense of belonging.
Exactly. That sense of common purpose when a large group does something meaningful together.
And what about transmitting the actual knowledge, the moral frameworks?
That wasn't left to chance either. They had sacred texts, oral traditions. But crucially, they relied on mentorship, on elders.
So teaching by example.
By lived example, yeah. Where virtues weren't just ideas in a book, but qualities you saw every day in the people you respected. That's the difference between reading about humility and seeing it.
And what about the individual?
Well, there was inner work too. The study points to things like meditation and contemplation as central tools for, cultivating inner awareness. Self-correction.
And this wasn't all done alone.
No, never. Community participation was key. It reinforced spirituality as a collective journey, not just some private hobby. Even the art symbols, music, art, they were all used to make these spiritual truths tangible, emotional.
It sounds like an incredibly intense cultural effort, all aimed at ethical development.
It was.
But let's bring in the big caveat here. The Hale study is very careful about this part. If this classical approach was so great, why did it fall out of favor? Why did it so often lead to conflict?
And that's the necessary self-check, isn't it? We can't look at the past with rose-colored glasses.
Right.
Because while those methods were effective, they often led to some really serious negative outcomes. The risks of traditional approaches, as they call them, things that actively held back progress.
What were the biggest failure modes they identified?
Well, things like rigid indoctrination, without any freedom of inquiry.
Right.
When a spiritual system becomes dogmatic, it smothers the curiosity that science needs to breathe.
And that leads to exclusion.
It leads to exclusionary practices, prejudice against outsiders. We also saw fear-based teaching used for control. And maybe the most damaging was the suppression of actual science and philosophy whenever it seemed to challenge the established authority.
That's the great cautionary tale, isn't it? The historical conflict between science and religion.
It is. It shows that spiritual education, when it's divorced from a commitment to truth, it becomes fanaticism.
Which is why the study brings up that specific warning from Baha'u'llah.
Yes, that spiritual education has to inspire awe and virtue without resulting in fanaticism. The goal isn't blind adherence. It's conscious, informed moral action. A reverence for the sacred, but coupled with an absolute commitment to intellectual freedom.
So the key isn't to get rid of the foundation, but to safeguard it against dogma.
Exactly. A spiritual education that opens the mind, not one that closes it.
Okay, so how does the study bridge that classical idea with our modern world, with what we know now?
And that's the third section, and it's fascinating. They connect that classical wisdom directly to modern empirical findings. And it turns out that, modern science is actually affirming the measurable benefits of this kind of education.
This is where the two domains finally start talking to each other. So what are psychology and neuroscience telling us about things like awe and transcendence?
They're telling us these experiences are profoundly good for us. Studies on awe, that feeling of encountering something vast, show that it increases well-being and, crucially, it increases humility.
How does it do that?
Well, when you feel small in the face of the universe, the brain's default mode network, which is often tied up in ego and self-talk, it literally quiets down. It makes you less self-centered, more open.
So humility isn't just some old religious virtue. It's a psychological state that's necessary for objective thinking.
You could say that, yeah. And positive psychology research backs up the rest of it. Consciously cultivating virtues improves emotional intelligence, which you need for teamwork, for leadership.
What about meaning?
Having that meaning-making framework is one of the strongest supports we know of for mental health and resilience.
I also find the societal connections just as compelling. I mean, the goal of fostering the unity of humanity, that's now rigorously confirmed by genetics and anthropology, right?
It's an incredible alignment. Science confirms we're one species, fundamentally. So it reinforces the need for virtues like unity and justice. But, and this is an important boundary the study maintains,
Go on.
while science can explore the effects of spiritual practice, it has to acknowledge its limits in comprehending the divine essence itself. Science describes the observable. Spirituality defines the purpose.
So we have this dual validation. The classical foundation is necessary, and its benefits are backed up by modern psychology. How do the researchers propose we put these systems back together? They have a great metaphor for it.
They do. They frame it beautifully, using the human body as a model for society.
Right.
Science, in their analogy, is the hands of society. It's
Yeah.
our capacity to act, to build, to innovate, to manipulate the world.
And spirituality provides the guidance, the
Yes.
purpose.
That's the heart of society. The heart gives the motive force, the compassion, the wisdom to guide those hands toward ethical outcomes. Without the heart, the hands are they're working blindly.
Okay, so we need the hands and the heart. But we talked about the risks, right? The danger of the heart becoming fanatical. The paper adds a third element as a safeguard.
The ultimate safeguard. You need the hands and the heart, but you also need the eyes.
Which is?
Humility, they define humility as the eyes of society.
Yeah.
Humility is what ensures the heart doesn't lead the hands toward fanaticism. It's the capacity for self-correction, for seeing our own biases, for embracing intellectual freedom. It's the ability to see clearly.
That is a powerful synthesis. Humility isn't just a nice-to-have virtue, it's the calibration tool.
It's the necessary calibration tool. It keeps the heart from becoming a dictator and the hands from, just building bombs. So the overall synthesis for you, for the listener, is really clear. Integration is essential. Spiritual education provides the compass. Scientific education provides the tools. But if we hand out the tools before the compass is calibrated by humility,
We risk moving very, very fast in the wrong direction.
exactly.
So what does this all mean for us? Our deep dive into this Hale research suggests that rethinking our educational priorities isn't just some soft philosophical matter.
It's urgent.
The sources argue that classical spiritual education is foundational for unity, for resilience, for dignity, and for the ethical use of our science. It's the core prerequisite for building a functional civilization, especially now.
And if we take that premise seriously, that spiritual education is foundational and humility is the eyes of society, then we have to really question what we're doing in early education.
It's a huge challenge.
It is, and it leads us to a final provocative thought for you to consider. If this model heart, hands, and humility is accepted as vital, what concrete, non-religious, practical changes must be implemented globally to systematically measure and cultivate genuine humility in kids before they're allowed to specialize in these powerful scientific fields?
How do we test the calibration of the compass?
Before we hand over the keys to society's future.